I chuckled. After Suzanne called as her next witness, the guy she believed told the detectives that Sidley beat me up, giving me a motive to kill him. She realized that everything was going to hell when, during direct interrogation, Ralph didn't even have to conduct cross. He said, "Detective Watson must have misunderstood me." I told him that although Sidley instigated the fight and hit Lucas first, Lucas cleaned his face. Sidley spent the night in hospital. Suzanne then called the videographer about recording my alibi. After clarifying that he was the official videographer for the police department of the city where my basketball clinic is located, she asked, "Did you review the video recording you made, which is State Exhibit number 14? "Yes." "Is this a full video recording of the event?" "Yes." "Does it show that the defendant, Mr. Worthington, was there until about 1:50 p.m.? "No. It shows that he was there until about 4:00 p.m. And even then, we talked to him until about 4:30 p.m., when he left to drive the 90 miles back home." "What?" the prosecutor said in surprise. "I watched the DVD and it stopped at 13:50, and after that it was just static. You obviously didn't view the interference, and I have no idea how it ended up on your copy of the DVD. If you do this, you will see that it lasts up to 4 hours. Suzanne gave the witness a remote control. He fast-forwarded through the static, showing the rest of the video, and she stopped him as he fast-forwarded to 3 o'clock, then sat down. Ralph had the witness fast-forward to the end. The DVD showed 16:01, then the videographer confirmed that he saw me with his own eyes at the event from approximately 11 a.m. to 16:30 p.m. Suzanne said with the look of a cornered dog, "The prosecution has everything. Typically at this point, the judge will dismiss the jury and the defense will file a trivial motion for a verdict." The judge did not bother herself with this. She asked, "Mr. Boston, do you have a proposal?" "Yes, Your Honor. I am asking for a verdict of not guilty." "I have permission," she said, banging her gavel. "Miss Carney, I'm waiting for you in my room. The jury is out with my thanks." After that, the press was hungry for interviews. On the steps of the courthouse, Ralph first ranted about how the prosecution had done me a terrible service, and that he knew all along what the outcome of the case would be, and if the police and the prosecution had been honest, the case would never have been brought. He was a little careful with his words. I wasn't. After talking to Ralph, I told him that anyone who would vote for a crooked DA in the upcoming election was a fool, that Watson was the killer, and that the police should do their own investigation. I also said I would file a lawsuit against the DA for false prosecution. Another lawyer from Ralph's firm filed suit the next day, naming the district attorney Suzanne, whom I considered a heartless fool, and Detective Watson as defendants. Local media blew up the story. The district attorney and chief of police were in hiding. 3 days after the charges were dropped, as I was finishing up work at my charity, having just run an after-school program for disadvantaged girls and boys, a young woman approached me. I vaguely recognized her. "Mr. Worthington, I'm Shirley Williams," she said, holding out her hand. I shook it and then said, "I think I've seen you before, but I can't admit it." "Yes, although we were not introduced to each other. I sat in the courtroom when you had your first plea negotiations with Miss Carney, and I was present at your trial. Now everything has fallen into place. Although her dress was skimpy and she wore what appeared to be deliberately ugly glasses. I had initially noticed that she was attractive, and now, facing me, she looked even better." "What do you have to do with my business?" I asked, holding her hand a little longer than was necessary or appropriate. "I am an intern, fresh out of law school, and an observer. My internship ends next week. Miss Carney was too embarrassed to come to you herself, so she asked me to come talk to you," Shirley continued. "Let's go to my office," I smiled, making small talk with her as we walked a couple hundred meters to my office building from the recreation center, where I was holding an after-school program. When we entered my office, I invited her to sit down. She looked around. "Your office is much nicer and neater than I expected," she said. "Sorry to disappoint you," I smiled. She smiled back, then continued. "All members of the prosecution team apologize for the errors of judgment that occurred during your case, but are puzzled by the static gap in the DVD you provided as an alibi." "They are puzzled, right?" I smiled again. Besides, Ms. Carney and everyone else involved really want to apologize for everything. If everything had been investigated more thoroughly, the case would have been closed before trial. That's right, I smiled again. After a pause, Shirley said, "You're not going to make this easier, are you?" "Should I?" I smiled again. Shirley sighed. "Besides, Miss Carney wants to know what she can do to get you to drop your lawsuit against her." After a long pause, I asked, "Why are you here and not her?" "I think that after your tirade against her on the last day of the trial, she is afraid of you." "Why was she such a heartless piece of trash before I attacked her?" "She should have confronted the DA and dropped the case immediately after Watson's testimony. Now she understands it and sincerely apologizes." "Let me ask you a few questions. Of course, you don't have to answer them, and if you don't want to, you can get up and leave without any comment from me. Is it clear?" "Yes," she answered cautiously. "How old are you?" 26. "Are these glasses fake?" "Yes." "Why do you wear them?" "To discourage guys from pestering me." "Do you have a romantic relationship?" "No." "Are you heterosexual?" "Yes." "What are your plans after the internship ends at the end of next week?" "I hope that I will be offered a job in the prosecutor's office, but if not, then I will find a job in a local law firm, since I like the area. I already have 2 possible vacancies. What are you doing on Saturday evening?" "As of today, I have no plans. Maybe my roommate and I will go to a club." "What is your personal mobile phone number?" XXXXXX. All my questions and all her answers were asked completely dispassionately, without emotions or facial expressions. After a long pause, I said, "Tell Miss Carney that if you are offered a job in the prosecutor's office, I will drop the lawsuit against her. Tell her to tell the DA that if he makes a sincere public apology, Watson will be charged with the murder of my ex-wife, not just for his current falsification charge, and if you are offered a job in the DA's office, I will drop the case against him." Shirley chuckled silently. "Are you teasing me?" I replied stoically. "In no case. In fact, let me put this in writing." I went on the computer, wrote down what I just said, printed it out, signed it, and dated it. At the bottom, he added, "Otherwise, we'll see you in court." I handed the paper to Shirley. She looked at it, smiled, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Worthington," and extended her hand. I shook it and said, "You're welcome, Miss Williams." Looking out the window and seeing her leaving my building, I called her on her cell phone. She took it out of the pocket on the side of her purse, looked at the caller ID, and smiled, answering, "Shirley Williams." "Hello, Miss Williams," I said. "Lucas Worthington." "Isn't this the Lucas Worthington I just met?" she asked with a slight hint of amusement in her voice. "The same one. I understand that you don't have any firm plans for Saturday night, and I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me and see The Mousetrap at the Artist's Playhouse. It's the longest play in history." From the window, I saw her smile widely. After some delay, she said, "Yes, I agree, Mr. Worthington. Would you like me to meet you at a restaurant?" "No, if you don't mind, please text me your address, and I'll pick you up at 6:15 on Saturday evening." "I'll do that," she said, still smiling. After she ended the call, I saw her typing on her smartphone, and as soon as she returned it to her purse, I heard a beep on my cell phone. The message included her address, along with a smiling emoji. Between the time Shirley met me on Tuesday and the time I picked her up on Saturday, I paid for and received a full report on her from a private investigator. I didn't need another gold digger like Ashley, and I felt a connection with Shirley, who intrigued me in the short time we talked. It turned out that she had gone through a pretty messy divorce during her first year of law school, when her husband cheated on her, got straight A's in law school, did charity work part-time, and had all the hallmarks of a good citizen who grew up in a high-middle-class neighborhood with respected parents. One is a doctor, the second is an artist, and 2 older brothers. One is a business owner, and the second is a doctor. When I picked Shirley up, she looked great. Discreet but stylish clothes, light makeup, attractive hairstyle, no fake glasses. I asked to see her roommate before we left. I chatted with my neighbor and gave her 2 tickets to a concert at a local venue the following weekend. This impressed both her and Shirley. Dinner with Shirley was the strangest experience of my life. After small talk on the way to the restaurant, the most expensive in our city, at least in my opinion, we had only been sitting for a minute when she said, "We don't need to exchange basic information about each other, do we, Lucas? What I mean is that I already know almost all the relevant facts about your background from the investigation the police and prosecutors conducted on you before your trial, and I'm sure you have experienced people who have done a deep dive on me. Why don't we just move on to what makes us tick, what makes us happy, what are our goals in life, important things like where we went to school, how many children are in our families, etc." I was surprised, but not as much as I might have thought. The research I did on Shirley, combined with the exchange of information during our 101-minute dinner, meant that I knew her as well as anyone in my life. We had to skip dessert in order to get to the show on time, but since we both stated that we weren't big dessert fans, it wasn't much of a problem. The Mousetrap is an Agatha Christie comedic, murder mystery with a resolution at the end. Neither of us had ever seen it before, but we both loved it and decided that the 2+ hours we spent watching, it was worth it. When the performance ended, it was 11:15. Shirley became more and more comfortable with skin-to-skin contact, and I became more and more appreciative of her body and personality. When we got to my car, I asked, "Would you like to go to a club or do something else? The evening is not too late for us 20-year-olds." She looked into my eyes the way a cobra or a mongoose, I couldn't tell which, looked at its prey for a long time before answering. Her answer, a question, really, was the most surprising part of an amazing evening. After a deep breath, she asked, "Have you ever had sex on the first date?" It took me a while to realize the question, but I didn't ask her to repeat it. My measured answer was, "No. Why are you asking?" "Well, we know each other as well as people who have been meeting every weekend for months. The only thing we don't know about each other is how compatible we are between the sheets, or on the kitchen table, or in the pool, or... You get the idea. I feel a strong sexual attraction to you. If you feel the same way about me, let's make this the first night for both of us," she said stoically, and then smiled widely. I moved closer to her, hugged her, and gave her a series of short kisses with increasing passion. The last one wasn't short. It lasted a good 2 minutes, and cemented in my mind that she was a great kisser and a very warm person. When we broke the kiss, I asked, "Would you like to see my engravings?" She laughed and replied, "Let's. Only stupid people get into an intense relationship right after they've just gotten rid of a cheating spouse, Shirley through divorce, me through murder. Clearly, Shirley and I are idiots." When we got to my house, our sexual encounter was not intense. We didn't tear each other's clothes off. Instead, we stood face to face and looked into each other's eyes. By this time, I realized that I really liked Shirley's personality and her body. Every part of her body that could be identified when she was dressed looked perfect, with the exception of her butt. Nothing was too big and nothing was too small. Since I like big firm butts, I was delighted. Shirley slowly and methodically removed my shirt by feel only, as her eyes were directly on mine. When she took it off, I decided to say what was on my mind. "I want to fuck you on the kitchen table." Without hesitating for a second, she replied, "Bent over him or for me to lie on him? Last thing. You do everything yourself?" She chuckled. I kissed her and lifted her sculpted hips so that her legs were on my torso, and without breaking the kiss, although I hit a few walls because my eyes were practically closed, I carried her to the kitchen. Luckily, there were only documents and a few pieces of stainless steel on the table, nothing breakable, because I brushed them off the table with one hand. Then he put her butt on the table and broke the kiss. As we looked at each other again, I reached under her dress to remove her underwear, but couldn't find it. "You're really bad, aren't you?" I smiled, and she chuckled. "Hell yes." I lifted her dress and immediately fell to her private part with such enthusiasm as I had never taken on anything in my life. She leaned back on the table and soon moaned. She caught the climax so quickly that if she were a racing car, it would be like she accelerated from 0 to 60 miles in 2 seconds. Coming back from her climax, she muttered, "I thought you wanted to fuck me." I was still a little hungry, so I decided to have a snack first. I muttered. "Bastard," she said, sitting up and unbuckling my belt. I kissed her again. Sex with her was mind-blowing. I was moving at a speed comparable to the 146 beats per minute of Bruno Mars' Cast Out of Heaven, while she made inarticulate noises. I came to the final climax so quickly that I was afraid it was premature, but apparently she was just as excited because she followed me and began to shake as if she was having a seizure. When it was over, I practically lost consciousness. I had a feeling of euphoria that I don't think I've ever felt before, and her moans turned into purrs. After some time, we both came to our senses. "To bed," was her only comment. I jumped around until I kicked off my shoes, pants, boxers, and one sock, while she pulled her dress over her head and unclasped her bra. She jumped into my arms and I kissed her periodically, bumping into walls every now and then as I stumbled up the stairs to my bedroom. Although it wasn't an intentional decision on our part, we ended up spending the entire weekend together. Shirley had no problems in bed, and we tried everything we wanted with her. Outside of bed, she was more pleasant than any other woman I knew, cheerful, genuinely affectionate, playful, and easy to talk to on a variety of topics, from the mundane and mundane to the serious and spiritual. As we ate breakfast at the same table where we had sex less than 48 hours earlier, I suddenly remembered what we had talked about in my office. In between eating a cheese omelet, I asked, "Shirley, since we had so much fun this weekend, I forgot to ask if you passed on my suggestions to Suzanne an asshole." After swallowing a piece of English muffin, she replied, "Yes, Suzanne was very pleased and guaranteed that I would be offered full-time work next week." She chewed and swallowed another bite of the cake, then continued. "However, she told me not to tell the asshole about this proposal. Everyone, including him, knows you're the reason he'll lose the election, and he might just put my job offer on hold if I tell him it's you who said it. Plus, she thinks he'll never apologize, and besides, she wants your lawsuit against him to continue." I nodded in satisfaction and agreement as I continued to eat. What's actually funny is that Suzanne asked if you were interested in her personally. I think that despite your tirade against her on the last day of the trial, she is hoping for a relationship. After this comment, she gave me a sinister grin. I grinned back. "This won't happen. I found something better." I smiled and finished my breakfast. When I parked in front of Shirley's house, she became more open than any other person in my life. "So Lucas, we've known each other for a few days now, and we've discovered that we're more compatible with you in and out of bed than anyone else we've ever known or considered possible. Do you know what you would do if you were really smart?" She chuckled and then kissed me on the lips with a quick but meaningful kiss. "You would ask me to move in with you this weekend, with the idea of giving you a ring after we've lived together for a few months." After another kiss and a smile, she walked out the door, jiggling her nicely big, firm ass, and walked into the building without looking back. I thought deeply for about 30 seconds. Then he took out his cell phone, dialed the number that was now number 1 on my contact list, and when Shirley answered, he said, "Listen, Shirley, I just had a better idea. Why don't you move in with me next weekend?" "Why would you, Lucas? This is so unexpected." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I thought a lot. It seems like forever." "Okay," she laughed, "but you'll have to pay my share of the rent because Judy won't be able to do it herself." And she ended the call. Tricky bitch. I chuckled to myself. I could go on for many more pages about how stupid we were to jump into a relationship, how amazing it was that it not only worked out, but made our lives better than they could have been, how both accepted my charity work, although she was a tough prosecutor, and how everything was right in the world. But one episode will tell you everything you want to know. I was in the courtroom when Shirley Worthington, 8 months pregnant, delivered a masterful closing argument in Will Watson's murder and obstruction of justice trial in the deaths of Ashley Worthington and Brad Sidley. In her final statement, She convinced everyone that Watson was in love with Ashley, was outraged that she was having an affair with Sidley, and decided to kill Sidley in order to get her under his control and frame me. Unfortunately, he was careless when shooting Sidley, and one bullet passed through him and into Ashley, killing her. As the jury left the courtroom, I gave Shirley a big hug and kiss and gently rubbed her belly, telling her how proud I was of her. By the time we returned from afternoon tea, no more than an hour had passed since the jury began deliberating. She had received word that the jury had reached a verdict. After the sergeant major said, "Guilty on all counts," I waited while Shirley accepted congratulations from everyone around here, even from opposing counsel. When it was my turn to congratulate, I whispered in her ear, "Tonight I'll give you a nice bubble bath. I'll have your favorite food delivered from the most expensive Italian restaurant in town. I'll give you a foot massage, and then we'll have sex." Shirley smiled, kissed me, and said, "Sounds like a good plan. At least now that you have me, you won't be able to get me pregnant." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.